In today's video, we'll be taking a look at Vicarious Vision's cancelled Call of Duty game. It was codenamed Fireteam, and it would have been set in ancient Rome. The reason that this came about was due to the success that the Call of Duty name was bringing to Activision. They began to look for new ideas, so they opened the floor to developers working for them. A lot of ideas were pitched, and they were promised that whoever had a really good one would be able to work on this new IP. This is when Roman Wars was pitched, as a spin-off that would have kept the name Call of Duty attached for selling purposes. The game itself would have been in third person, and was loosely inspired by Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 2 game that had a top-down camera angle. Now, if you're familiar with the channel, you know that we had an ongoing cancelled game series, where we dive into 3 games cancelled by world-known gaming publishers. Today, I wanted to look specifically at Activision and their incredibly profitable Call of Duty series. If you enjoyed this one, you can check out my video on Call of Duty Future Warfare. Thank you for joining me today, and let's begin. The official name of this game would have been Call of Duty Roman Wars. The plot of the game, according to Polemos, one of the developers that worked on the game, said the following. Basically, we were following Julius Caesar's 10th Legion, his special forces during those times, and we were doing a one-level prototype based on the Battle of Alesia. So we built that one mission based on that. We had everything from riding horses to riding an elephant to working with catapults. Now, this gives you an idea of what the game would have or could have been. Polemo said that the idea of the full game was much bigger, and it would have seen you take control of many different characters in Julius Caesar's army. He said that the game would have loosely followed the accounts recorded on the Commentari de Bello Gallico, and I butchered it. I'm sorry, which was Julius Caesar's first-hand account of the Gallic Wars, written as a third-person narrative. In it, Julius Caesar describes the battles and intrigues that took place in the 9 years that he spent fighting the Celtic and Germanic peoples in Gaul that opposed Roman conquest. Now, this would have definitely been an interesting plot that was set during wartime, and there would have been a lot of information to pull from. But branding a game like this Call of Duty could have probably changed the franchise forever going forward. Now, the reason for the game's cancellation seems to point to the fact that although Activision were clearly looking to expand the world and the reach of their Call of Duty franchise, they didn't want to oversaturate their market. Now, what I believe is that they felt like attaching the name Call of Duty to any and all types of different games that revolved around war could have hurt their brand and potentially caused the name to lose value. Because if Roman Wars would have come out, surely we would have seen something like Sea Wars or Air Wars or the Napoleon War, and so on. I just really feel that it could have lost its meaning. Polemo said that the game was sent to Activision's CEO at the time, but it sadly never made it past the prototype stage. Polemos also stated that he really believed the idea was good, and it could have sold well. He pointed to the release of Rise, Son of Rome, a game that released around the time Roman Wars could have released, and he believed that if Activision would have gone ahead and made Roman Wars, it would have been so much better and so much bigger due to their size and their resources, and he just feels like it was kind of a missed opportunity for them. Devil's Brigade was a third-person shooter game that was set in World War II, and it was developed by Underground Development. This game was intended to be played on the Xbox 360, on the PlayStation 3, and Microsoft Windows PC. Although this game had Activision as the publisher and Jason Vandenberg as the designer, their hard work would never get to see the light of day. The official name of the game would have been Call of Duty Devil's Brigade, and this game would have a big focus on orders, weapons, equipments, and vehicles. And because the game was far from completion, only some things can be seen in the form of screenshots that were taken back then. For example, some weapons that we see are the AK-47, the Thompson, and the MP-40. Some of the equipment seen are flashbangs, M67 grenades, and night vision goggles. Lastly, some of the vehicles that we see in these screenshots were the Opel Blitz, the SDKFZ 251, and the Tiger 1. And in terms of plot, because the game wasn't that far in development, we don't know all that much about it, except for the fact that it was set in World War II, and the developers wanted to focus a lot on giving direct orders. The soldiers in the game were essentially skillful, trained killing machines. The majority of the fight would take place in Italy and France. The developers were trying to create a 12 to 15 minute segment, also known as the vertical slice. The inspiration began with a German general who was in charge of Rome until American and European forces arrived. They were going to blow up the bridges and then stand back. However, in this scenario, the Devil's Brigade were first sent in to make sure that this bridge didn't get blown up by the Germans. Using something called squad control, you, the main player, would be able to sneakily fix bridges and place explosives, clearing a path for the Americans and preparing yourself to fight the enemy. Now, the reason for the game's cancellation would really come down to a merger that was happening at the time. When Infinity Ward came in, they wanted to control the Call of Duty IP, and they kind of pushed over the development for Devil's Brigade, and they focused on other things like Modern Warfare and other projects that they had. They basically grabbed Devil's Brigade and just threw it to the side. The game would never be released, and it would never be worked on again. Call of Duty's Devil's Brigade seemed to have the fundamental baseline to be exciting and entertaining for those who had a PS3, Xbox 360, or a PC at the time. I personally feel that it would have been a good or fun game to play, and from the screenshots that we see, it looks like I would have enjoyed the game as well, especially when I was younger. Call of Duty has now expanded to being a first-person shooter game, and so Devil's Brigade being a third-person shooter would have maybe changed the way that Call of Duty games would have been made going forward at the time. And it is unfortunate to see Call of Duty Devil's Brigade join a lineup of canceled games that we never really got to see from Call of Duty or from Activision. A lot of time and money went into this project, and it would have been good to see it fulfilled. But unfortunately, it will remain in the canceled graveyard. Now, if we remember, the Call of Duty franchise went futuristic with 2014's Advanced Warfare, but they had been planning to go there for years. Back in 2010, Activision would trademark the names Future Warfare alongside Secret Warfare and Advanced Warfare. This would indicate that they were potentially working or beginning work on other Call of Duty franchises that never came to light. Of course, with the exemption of Advanced Warfare. Now, if you're familiar with this channel, you know that we have an ongoing canceled game series where we dive into 3 games canceled by world-known gaming publishers. Today, I want to take a look specifically at Activision and their incredibly profitable Call of Duty series. Now, if you enjoy this one, we can check out some of their other canceled games in future videos. Thank you for joining me, and let's begin. The official name of this game would have been Call of Duty Future Warfare. The plot of the game, according to Brian Bright, who was a developer and producer for Neversoft, stated that the campaign was set 30 to 50 years into the future, with at least one mission, Moon-Based Assault, being set on the moon, with low-gravity gameplay. Now, as far as more story details, we don't really have much else to go on. However, we do have the names of other missions that would have been included in the game. They were titled as follows: Border, Visiting Hours, Into the Fire, Winter Anvil, Descent, Hit Hard at Home, Moon-Based Assault, and Operation Deadbolt. From these names, we can use our imagination to infer what they could have been like. For example, Border could have seen us cross into another country and see how they lived in the future, maybe Mexico or something like that. And Winter Anvil could have seen us gone to some extremely cold mountains in another continent, exploring or trying to find someone or something. Now, of course, this is all speculation. Now, if you look at the footage that I'm displaying behind you, each mission that I've just named has a picture to go alongside with it. So in these pictures, you can kind of decipher what direction each of these missions would have taken. There was also talk about the multiplayer mode that would have been used in Call of Duty Future Warfare. Apparently, it would feature an escort mode as well as the first version of Clan Wars, which at the time would have been called the Emergent War. It also seems like we would have gotten a slightly different version of the exosuits that would have become a part of the Call of Duty series with the releases of Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare. Now, the reason for the game's cancellation is unclear. However, it could have been that Activision wasn't ready to go full-on futuristic yet, and they decided to go for the safer and more traditional option in Call of Duty Ghost, because if Future Warfare would have been released, it would have replaced the game Ghost that came out back in 2013. And to be quite honest, it would have probably changed the landscape of the future of the games moving forward at the time, especially Infinite Warfare, as it looks like it borrowed quite a lot from the scrapped Neversoft Call of Duty game. And Neversoft, who was a developer at the time that was really known for their Tony Hawk Pro Skater series and later their Guitar Hero series, would never fully work on a Call of Duty game of their own again, as they would merge into the already established Infinity Ward back in 2014, and they would help in the development of other games in the series. Over the years, many fans of the Call of Duty series have wondered why we haven't had a full game that takes place during the Vietnam War. One would think that it's a setting that Activision would want to explore more, and it would also give us a very gritty and eye-opening experience. However, to this day, we haven't received a game set there. Some fans have speculated that it could be due to the setting of the war and where it takes place. Some believe it could be limiting in terms of maps and things like that. Through Call of Duty's history, we have visited the Vietnam War, but only in flashbacks and small sequences, the most recent being Call of Duty Cold War. However, we were very close to getting a game set during the Vietnam War, but it could have looked like a very different Call of Duty game. The official name of the game would have been called Call of Duty Fog of War. There are no plot details that I could find for the game, but at the time it was being developed by Sledgehammer Games, and one of the founders of Sledgehammer Games, Glenn Schofield, was a part of the project. He was the creator of the Dead Space games, and he assured fans that it would have been a very different take on war. He stated that they had done a lot of research for the war, and it would even have some Dead Space-like moments, which to me translates to it would probably show some very brutal moments during the war and potentially push what we had seen up to that point. The reason for the game's cancellation seems to point to Activision asking Sledgehammer Games to assist in the development for Modern Warfare 3 in 2010. This was due to the internal conflict that the studio Activision was embroiled in with Infinity Ward at the time, causing them to lose resources in the development for Modern Warfare 3 and needing an extra hand. Glenn Schofield at the time said during an interview that they were given the choice to assist with Modern Warfare 3's development or continue their work on the Vietnam War game. They put Fog of War on hold, but it would remain there indefinitely, and in a 2011 interview, he said that it was more than likely cancelled. The game would have been a third-person action-adventure shooter, similar to what we had seen in Uncharted at the time, and similar to the original Dead Space. The team would go on to develop Advanced Warfare, and in 2014, Glenn Schofield stated that if they ever asked him to do a third-person Call of Duty game again, they would just resume development on their Fog of War title. However, this is extremely unlikely now because that interview was not only 10 years ago, but Glenn Schofield left Sledgehammer Games and went on to create the Callisto Protocol. In the end, we never received a Vietnam War game, and we may never get it either. If Activision already dipped their toes into that genre, into that game, and they haven't gone back after all these years, I don't think that they ever will. And quite honestly, the most we'll see of the Vietnam conflict is probably going to be on callbacks and flashbacks for future Call of Duty games.